And now it's my honor to introduce Juan. Juan was born in Santa Ana, California. He's a multidisciplinary artist who received his Bachelor of Fine Arts in drawing and painting at California State University Fullerton. His parents emigrated from Zacatecas in the 1960s to seek a better life. They instilled in him a very strong work ethic, and Juan also works as a professional librarian in Santa Ana, which he's always busy, it's hard to get him. And just a little bit about these wonderful entwined works. Beautiful Blood tells the tale of familial traditions through physicality. Intentionally selected materials are imbued with personal meaning, weaving, and individual stories that go into the art. Please welcome Juan Gomez.
So I just to begin, so I went to Cal State Fullerton, and I studied to be a painter. That's where my interests were at that time. So, I mean, as you can see, I mean, the work is very different from my studies. Very different from my studies, and it's moved on to this. My paintings about 3 years ago, when I started working in this manner, that I kind of wanted to break away from painting. I felt like a lot of my ideas that have to do with my origins and familial oral history, that's what the paintings were about initially. But I felt that, and I'm going to take a moment and be a little self-critical of myself, as most artists are. But the work I was doing about 3 years ago that had to do with these origins, I felt got stuck in the nostalgic. It's things that I didn't quite understand, or I was trying to think about these stories and individuals that I never met, kind of in a nostalgic way. And there's, of course, I don't mean to criticize being nostalgic. There's a place for it. It's just presently that's not where I want the work to be. I don't want it to be nostalgic. I want it to be more, want to make it really clear that I'm connected to like my culture, my family, my ancestors, that it's like a active thing that I have from day to day, or that I deal with day to day, and that it's a part of me, and also what I am as an artist and what it influences me to be an artist. So there came a point where I kind of wanted to break away from painting. The format was a little too limiting for me, and there was always the intention in my paintings was to always mix different medias in. But again, like, there was that realm of nostalgia that I felt made my ideas disintegrate within that process of painting. And it's not a criticism of painting, it's just that's where my headspace has been at. Although I don't consider myself a painter anymore, I feel that's too limiting. I'm a mixed media artist. I can paint if I want to paint. I can draw if I want to draw. I felt it was a little limiting to specifically do paintings. And during the pandemic, 3 years ago, and I'm sorry, it gets a little foggy with the pandemic, but it's like a lost year. I started to try to figure out what I wanted to do in my work, and I looked at my family as a whole and what is it that inspired me and who they were. And they were these people that lived in Zacatecas, and they were laborers, they were blue-collar workers, they were tradesmen and tradeswomen, they were nurturers of land, nurturers of family, they were providers. And I wanted to find that connection between, from me, from my parents, and from these people. And the people that actually did it me were my grandparents. And they were these larger than life figures to me, because it's more memories as a child that lived a completely different life from my own. They worked with the land, they rode horses, they very appreciative of the land and nature. And it was very different from the life that I was living here in the US. It's a culture shock. So that was very, that really struck me from an early age, and it's something that's been part of my work now as a 40-year-old man. So I was looking at my family as a whole, and I wanted to find something that I had more of a connection to, or something that something that I've lived with, and what that is are the being a son to my parents, to Juan Gomez and Maria Gomez, and their experiences individually and collectively as a family, and the ups and downs and the ins and outs of their experiences. I know individually it was hard for them to leave their homes at an early age, come here to the United States, and of course there was opportunity for them here, but it was a struggle. My dad from early in the morning to late in the evening worked as a truck driver and construction worker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she was kind of that rock that held the family together. She took care of us, took care of me and my siblings. And I know before they found each other, coming here to the U.S. it was hard assimilating into their culture while still trying to stay connected to their home culture. Being unfortunately, they encountered some rough patches being immigrants, and the way they were looked at by people here in the States that aren't sensitive to that, and the hurdles they had to go through that as well, of being accepted into this culture. But they persevered, and they're here, and I'm here. I'm talking to you now because of them and because of their struggles. They gave me the opportunity they taught me how to take care of my own family, and be able to make a living for myself, and to be an artist as well. So kind of the what's the same, or what connects us all is, and you're going to see this in this work, is the use of of rope. Rope is, it's been used ancestrally, since my ancestors have always been people that work with the land. It's the rope used to draw water from a well, to lasso animals, to bundle up packages, crops. My father used it as a truck driver. He always had this, it always struck me, it always impressed me that whenever he was securing a load on his truck, he would allow me to try and tie a knot. But I was so, clumsy, and I just could never, the only thing I could do is like tie like a shoelace. And that doesn't really hold anything, so he just kind of moved me over and kind of nod his head and just do something really like elaborate and really quickly, and that always struck me. And similarly, my mom, even though not with rope, my mom's always, she always like mended our clothes, sewed our clothes. When a button fell off, she sewed it on really quickly, and so that's always been like a connection and binder for me. So this work is related to this work is about them. It's about their experiences. As I said, the ins and outs. I'm not privy to their whole life because at a point I didn't exist. But what I do know, from what I do know, is that there were struggles, and I'm not trying to make it a sob story. It's a beautiful journey. It's a beautiful life, and in family there's always complications, and everyone's journey is different, but there's always some type of complication. And in this work, what I wanted it to be more meditative, more personal, more intimate, and I felt that's what was lacking in painting. With these works, I'm actually tying these knots, which are a representation of these people's life stories. There's ins and outs, there's layers, there's a meditative quality when when I tie these knots together. I'm focusing on their lives, their life story, and as I said, the ins and outs, and along with these knots are these soft sculptures, or rope structures as I call them. They're more to me, I'm constructing these physical family heirlooms for myself. They're visual cues that I could use as ways to remember them. And I'm now using rope in this way, and that's how I'm tying myself to the lineage from my ancestors, grandparents, my parents, and now I'm using rope in this way. As an artist, as a painter, that's my contribution to the line. And along with this rope is an intermixing of thread and cardboard netting. Cardboard netting that is from my job. It's remnants of orders that come in, packaging that's easily discarded. But this netting was used originally to keep a content of whatever delivered box I would process to protect. So similarly, I'm using this netting as a way to protect them, or to protect their memory. and that also instills the idea of importance or how I feel about these people. I would like to take a moment to share like how heavily layered or storied these pieces are. And kind of showing you this piece, for example, that I don't know if some of you can see, or if you'd like to get up and take a look at it, you can. So this piece is constructed with netting, with butcher netting, a silk gift bag, cotton rounds, and zip ties. But there's a conscious there's a conscious effort to protect that cotton round that's in the middle, because there's like a scar or an injury that I'm trying to protect. And these directions, these symbolize the directions my parents took as immigrants, and the directions that the generations that they were a part of took as well. So that they're part of a large generation that came here to this country. So that's what this piece is symbolizing. So it's very layered, and there's very much a story to them, even though they're, in my opinion, all the pieces are abstract. Before I conclude, one thing I did want to say, one thing that I wanted to add is this work was something that was very difficult to overtake, because my nature is to be a painter, and to be very, very representational. But this was very difficult to take on because it was a little more abstract. So I was like very uncomfortable with releasing this work, very, very frustrated with it to a point, because I really didn't know that it was conveying what I was trying to explain or show. And it was, like I said, too abstract. But I feel, and I don't know if there are any students out here, any students that are here in the university, like, I think it's a good place, if you plan to be artists, it's a good place to be uncomfortable with your work. I mean, it's good for growth. But I think what anchors all that confusion and uneasiness, and that you're not walking on steady ground, what anchors all that is that you have to be very intentional about what color choices, what materials you're using. That's what anchors the instability of this work, and that's what helped me get through this work. That's what helped me become comfortable in showing it, because there's an intention behind everything that's there. The colors, the materials, as I explained my connection with rope, the colors, that as you're going to look at this work, if you haven't seen it up close yet, there's pinks, there's oranges, there's yellow, there's purple. If it's okay, do you mind if I go through that? I don't know if we're running short on time.
Yeah, go ahead.
So those color choices, pink represents, maternity. My mother that was really involved in raising me, and that connection between baby and mother, and how very much a part of your life it is, even to through childhood to adulthood. It's something that's always present. Yellows is represents the house I was raised in. It's this yellow house on Elaine Drive in Santa Ana. Like it's this yellow house that's been a part of my life for so long. So that color, that I always have that connection with that color because it reminds me of home. Orange is a representation of my father, who is also very present, very supportive, very, he himself is a very intense person, hardworking, and that's something that he instilled in me and my mother instilled, but my father I've always felt he has that fiery personality to keep going, you know. And purple is, you know, along with all the complications that these pieces are explaining, there's also a lot of, the purple is more of a bruise or you know, purple equalizes a bruising or an injury, which, you know, which is a part of their journey. Everybody's journey has, you know, everybody's life. We have injuries, we learn from them and we go on, but that's a part of it. Yeah, no, and what this work means to me is I feel like I'm in a good place. I don't know what I'm gonna do after this, but it's a good place that I'm thinking of more ways of how to take this step into my work and see what else I can do, or what else can I bring in or subtract. And that's kind of where I stand right now as an artist. Like it's kind of, you know, after this show is complete, it's kind of back to the drawing board and to see where I'll go next. But this has been a good run, and I just kind of wanted to, you know, as I conclude, state my appreciation to the Kleefeld for having me and inviting me to be a part of this show, to the director, Paul Baker Prindle, for his support, for coming over to my studio and talking to me and helping me through this process, and, you know, all the staff here at the Kleefeld, Amanda, Chris, you know, everyone's been very supportive, and, you know, I just want to say thank you, and thank you all for coming and hearing me out. I'm not the best public speaker, but, you know, hopefully I didn't torture you guys too much, but really thank you guys for taking an interest and listening to the story behind my work. I appreciate you all for coming. Thank you.
So if you don't mind, Juan, we'd like to open the floor to questions. Does anyone mind have one?
Sure.
Alice?
You were talking about the color, because I was interested in your color palette. Are these natural colors, or the items just naturally that color, or did you manipulate them?
No, I manipulated them. And the colors, as far as, you know, I manipulated them. You know, cardboard is, you know, has its usual color, so, you know, I manipulated those. And I wanted to be the color, I wanted the colors to be very saturated and intense, because I feel the work, it lends itself, it has to be a little more intense, because the work is intense, it's very personal. And I felt like if, say, I used the same colors, but they were muted, it wouldn't have the same effect. Also, you know, I forgot to mention that, but also the placement of the work. You know, I wanted to be very, the way the work is hung, like I wanted everyone to have their own space as far as viewers, like connecting with the work and kind of solely focusing on one piece at a time. From the get-go, we were playing with different ways of hanging the work, but I felt like this made more sense.
Michael, you have a question?
What happens to the sculptures when they leave here? Do you exhibit another spot? Do you go to a gallery?
Well, I mean, and I'll add that, I mean, they are for sale, but, you know, they would go, you know, if nothing gets, you know, purchased, they would go back to my studio. They're still very present. You know, there's a few of them still in my studio. They're still very present. It's weird, and I was discussing this with someone that came to visit the studio, but I feel to be actively engaged with them. They're not in boxes. They're actually hanging from the rafters of my studio. They're not wrapped or anything, so as I continue working in this way, I want to continually look at them. And that's so different from my paintings. My paintings, once they're done and they've shown and they have nothing next in line, they get wrapped up and put away. But this work, it's a little different.
Other questions? Wendy?
I don't have a question, just a comment that after hearing you speak, I feel like this collection is really an expression of love, and I'm very moved.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Other questions? Helen?
I would like you to take one, if you could, and just walk us through your thinking and how you put it together. Because you said it's meditating, and you know, when you look at it now, you'll remember what you were thinking. And
Sure.
that's always fascinated me. The process.
Sure.
It doesn't matter which one, just
Yeah. Well, So. So I'm going to take this smaller one that I'm a little sensitive to because, this piece and this piece is called Maria Dolores and the brother I never knew. So constructing this space, well, first of all, the whole idea behind it is, you know, unfortunately, my mother had a few miscarriages. I was actually in between these two siblings that I didn't get to know, and she lost my sister Maria Dolores crossing the border. She fell walking over a hill. And the way she fell, it caused her to you know, lose my sibling. So I kind of wanted to commemorate that, and this, you know, the color is very, you know, maternal. The ties, as I was tying these together, I wanted to be very tightly woven because it's a very difficult thing to you know, I'm only mimicking what, you know, I can't tell you what all her emotions are. It's very complicated. Even when she's told me about it, I can't like put myself in her shoes. It's just, it's too much to bear, you know? And, you know, I wanted the knots to be very, very tight and wound around this central piece, which I signify as my mother. It's a very sturdy central piece. And well, yeah, it's literally me sitting and, you know, a sitting down posture, tying this over and over until, you know, it's actually a long piece of rope that I've put down into like a really, you know, like this might be 4 or 6 inches, but I mean, lengthwise it's longer. And I've cut it down to, you know, this size because I'm like tightly making little knots, and I'm kind of mimicking her experience or what her emotions were at that time and what her emotions are now. And what's hanging over is, you know, this kind of, I didn't exactly want to be totally representational, but it's kind of has that figure of a child being wrapped. And that's kind of tied to her, and that's always going to be tied to her, you know, for as long as, you know, we're all here, you know. It's a part of her, you know, and it's a part of me as well, but, you know, the connection is a lot deeper with her because I never knew this person, you know. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where all that was constructed.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Other questions?
I was just wondering, did you have to like teach yourself how to tie them, or did you already previously know, or did you build upon any previous knowledge?
So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm sorry, who asked the question? Oh, sorry. Yeah. You know, my dad was very adept at making knots. I was not. I was like, I don't know where, you know, that, you know, all came from. Like, I mean, you know, it's experience and all that, but like, I was always amazed how quick he tied things. And I was really bad at it. So yeah, no, I really had to sit down, learn how to make knots. It's still not a perfect process. I still need visuals to like really get it down. And, you know, and it's just you know, the more I do it, the more I'll get better at it. But it's something that, it's a constant thing. I'm not quite, I can't say I'm a master at it. I'm still very, you know, beginner stage, but there is definitely a lot of trial and error. But that's part of that meditative quality. Like, you're sitting down, you're focusing on that, and you keep going with that and keep going. And sometimes it doesn't turn out right, and you just add it to the pile and then you keep going. So, yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us your story, and the focus was incredibly delicate, beautiful, and impressive.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, when you work by yourself in your studio, do you have music on? What is your practice in your studio?
Yeah, in the studio, yeah. There's always music going on. It's kind of part of the process. Like, I feel like I'm very musically inclined, even though I don't I don't play an instrument, but I think that's how I feel about my work. It's like the latest album cycle, and it's kind of like doing my demos and doing, you know, I'm literally in the studio like practicing and doing my demos, and when the work is done, or the group of work is done, that's like the album release. But it kind of puts me in that mode when I listen to music, that I'm working towards something. As far as like specific type of music, there's all types. Like, I have my jazz week and my rock week and classical week, but there's always playing in the background.
They feel musical to me.
Oh, thank you.
That feeling of sound. I don't know why.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to ask a question? I had a question. You started talking about how you felt that you were becoming too nostalgic in the painting, and I wondered if you felt now that you've changed media, gone a little abstract, although now that you hear your story, in really many ways it's not. Has that gone away from that nostalgia, or how do you feel?
No, I mean, I don't, and I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just, there's some qualities that, when you're doing a painting, like you're not actually like touching the work, you're kind of using a device to, a brush to put your ideas down. So I felt that was kind of lacking, like it needed more of a tactile quality to the work to make it even more personal. But I mean, there is a sense of nostalgia in the work, I'll admit, but I feel there's other qualities as well. Whereas the work before, and I think that's hard to, I'm not showing you an example of, I don't have an example of earlier work, so it's hard, but it's things that, I was talking more about people that I would only hear oral history or stories about, people I had never met. But it's maybe like an event or something they did that was like admirable, or something that wasn't admirable, and maybe a life lesson that I wouldn't undertake. But it's thinking about it at a distance and not have it be so close. Whereas these are more, it's something that I'm very aware of, and I can get the nuances and complications and insert that into the work.
How does your family feel about the work? I don't know.
Well,
I think they should be so honored that you.
I don't know, because they weren't very, they haven't seen too much of this work, honestly. I think I can admit this is probably I think this is probably the first time they see it all complete. They had an idea, but they weren't too sure about it. I think they still thought I was doing paintings. So this might be like, because they have some of my paintings at home. And so yeah, I don't know. I'll have to talk to them, but well, I don't know. It might be a little, and I don't want to speak for them, but it might be something like it might be a little too abstract for them, I'm guessing, but I guess they'll let me know when I get home. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at them right now, they seem okay, so. Sure. Oh, thank you.
Any more questions, anyone? Oh, Kathleen.
I was wondering if you had, if you can remember, there was a certain aha moment or something when you decided to use these materials and move from painting to something like this.
Yeah, well, in 2019, I had a solo show in a space called the Greenlee Art Space in Signal Hill. I don't know if any of you have been there. So I had a solo show there, and my goal with that show was, to present that type of work, but my other goal was to completely fill the gallery with my work. And I was primarily, doing paintings at that point. But, kind of time was, deadlines were coming, and I kind of had to have my work ready at a certain point. I felt like I was running behind. And I feel like I needed visual breaks from the paintings as well, and that's kind of what was causing the delays as well. I was a little stressed or a little overwhelmed with that deadline hanging over me. And I felt like I wasn't going to have enough work for that show. So what I was doing is, kind of taking a break, and I had rope lying around it was for another purpose. And I started like tying things together, and I thought like, like this looks interesting. And like I thought to myself, maybe this is a way for me to accumulate more work and try and try to have accumulate a better body of work, because the materials are a lot simpler. It's not, at that time it wasn't very process based. So that's where that came in. Like I was like, and it took me back to like, thinking about my father, like trying to teach me how to do knots. I was just like, that would be an interesting, thing to add to my show, and maybe show him like, look, I'm trying to learn how to do knots, but all within the story of those paintings that I was showing at the time. So it was an easier way to accumulate work and have a larger body of work where I could fill up the whole gallery. But after that show, I was very, sorry, to answer your question, that's where that came from. But after that show, I was very unhappy with the first attempts at this type of work, because it was very vertical and very one direction, and there wasn't too much. It wasn't as involved, and it wasn't as an involved process as these were. So that's where that all originated from. The unhappiness and figuring out ways of how to add on to this work.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
Yes, I was listening to you, and this is true. I just think that artists, they need time. Sometimes the purpose is not to fill my space.
Right.
But they discover through the time, because, for example, in the school, they need to finish the MFA in no time, and they're so stressful, they don't sleep. But when you just graduate and you pass through that experience, it's a big shock. You said, no. It doesn't matter if the space is big. I want to create something that is meaningful, maybe for me or for everybody, but the job has to have sense and meaning.
Right.
And that's the main thing.
Right.
I'm supposed to learn that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I mean, at that point, I was just, you want to you want to see something out of it, and you want to be a little. I think at that point it was very ambitious. It was more about filling out the space. But I mean, that definitely, like, I've learned over time, and just doing this for a while, that less is more. And that came, that was also, I applied that to this show as well. Like, there's actually more. This is just a portion of this work. It's about 33, 34 pieces in total. And some are a little bit larger than these. But when it came to hanging the work, it didn't make sense to just, drown you visually with all these things kind of hung on the wall with like no rhyme or reason. It had to be hung a certain way, and when I came here with 20 pieces, and I left 15 here, and I left 5 more that I was excited about including in the show, but it made no sense to include them because it just was too much visually. It just didn't make sense. It was too much, and I felt like it was going to inundate the viewer, overwhelm them maybe.
Sure. Any more questions? Oh, thank you so much. I just wanted to let you all know that Juan will be leading a workshop in November on the 17th. So if you really want to get your hands into this, it should be really fun. I'm looking so forward to it. Thank you, Juan, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.